Financial support for the production of Issues in Education is provided by
the Florida State University License Plate. Your FSU license plate supports scholarships for students who enrich and contribute to our communities. Special programs, gift certificates, and rebates for first-time buyers online at fsu.edu/mytag.
Coming up today on Issues in Education, more than just a residence hall. We look at the current trend in America's university system to create living learning communities and how they work. Welcome to Issues in Education. I'm Suzanne Smith, alongside my co-host, Florida State University President, Dr. Eric Barron. In America, it was once a given that a college freshman would head off to school and live in a residence hall, often with a complete stranger. Nowadays, many colleges and universities are designating special living areas for students with shared interests and also providing them with special academic opportunities. They're called Living Learning Communities, or LLCs. To talk about how FSU has set up their LLC program, we're joined by the director of one of those communities, Dr. Bill Parker. He's in charge of the general interest-based LLC at FSU's Bryan Hall. To tell us what it's like to actually experience these communities are Khloe Greenwood, a freshman currently living in FSU's Social Sciences and Public Affairs LLC, and Kaue Tozzi, who's a sophomore and lived in the Bryan Hall community last year. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
So, Bill, we know parents are hearing this word living learning community, and it probably means something very different in a different university. What does it really mean at Florida State?
In the simplest terms, I guess you could say that it's a small group of students who live together, who take a few classes together, and together explore special academic opportunities which are all united by a common theme or a common thread. And the intent is that this will produce a very tight-knit and academically successful community that will not only enhance their freshman experience, but go on to enhance the rest of their time at FSU.
Well, let's talk about the different areas. There are 7 communities at FSU. Tell us what they are.
Well, we can divide them into 3 groups. The first group is sort of a general interest group, and it includes those open to students of any major and any potential profession. The oldest is Bryan Hall, my community, which is focused on curiosity and the desire to learn. There's also one called Social Justice, which is focused on students who are interested in aspects of social justice, leadership, and activism. And then finally, one on Social Science and Public Affairs, which is intended for students who are interested in understanding and affecting how the world around them works. The second group involves a learning community which is more focused at a career goal, still open to students of any major, but this time focused on those which intend to pursue health-based careers.
So it could be future doctors
Exactly.
or physical therapy or any of that kind of stuff.
Or any of those.
Okay.
And then finally, there's a group, the third group, which are major focused communities. And there's one for music majors, one for nursing majors, and then WIMSE, Women in Math, Science, and Engineering.
What, a tremendous variety. And I'm just curious, from the student viewpoint, does this attract you to a university? Did you see living learning communities and say, this is one of the reasons why I want to go to Florida State? And maybe you could tell us your majors while you're at it, so we see how you fit into this structure.
I'm in an industrial engineering major, and originally, before coming to Florida State, I didn't know about the living and learning communities. Now, having experienced a year, I would definitely have chosen to come here because it was just such a great experience.
Well, I'm actually a philosophy major, and I do live in the social science public affairs living learning community, which isn't a social science, obviously. But I actually found out about the LLCs at Preview when touring different colleges, and it definitely factored into my decision. I like the element of being able to live in a group with a group of people who had similar interests, so I could get different perspectives and just broaden my breadth of knowledge. Now, the FSU has an honors housing and as well as wellness. Is that different from an LLC, or can you do both, or how are those two related, or are they?
Well, it's similar or or different approaches, I should say, to enhancement of the freshman experience or the undergraduate experience. The honors house and the wellness housing are not as heavily academically oriented or integrated as the LLCs are. And in fact, it's possible to be an honors student and live in one of the other LLCs. In fact, there are a number of honors students in the various LLCs.
Are either one of you also in the honors program as well? Both of you are. Okay.
Interesting. So now Bryan Hall was the first
Yes.
living learning community. What got this started at Florida State?
Well, if you go back to the mid-90s, a number of large research universities were investigating the concepts of something like a living learning community to both enhance the freshman experience and provide an introduction of students to the rather intimidating environment of a large research-based university. And George Weaver at Florida State proposed the very first living learning community, which ended up being Bryan, and it was established in 1997. And it was so successful that in subsequent years, other learning communities were established, the most recent one being nursing in 2007. And in fact, we're considering new learning communities even today.
Let's talk about what the experience of living in these are like. The Bryan Hall is named after a location. Are the others just residence halls, or are they, Bryan Hall, you actually take classes within the building. So how is that structured?
Well, in my LLC, we also have an in-house course that we take our first semester of our freshman year. And in addition to that, we take our colloquium, which is our LLC colloquium, a 1 credit hour course. And it's really interesting to be able to have that specialized course that you get to take with, more hands-on with your professor, and then have the whole colloquium in your 1 credit hour. And I think that differs, or I think that's synonymous with Bryan Hall, where you do take courses within the LLC.
So everybody sort of understands that you build this community bond, and you just described essentially what the learning part of this is. Is the learning piece the same in every hall, in every LLC?
Not necessarily all of them, but I know from my experiences in Bryan, we took 1 course in the fall and 1 course in the spring together. And it was usually a more general course. It wasn't something very major specific to get your general requirements out of the way. And for someone like myself who came in with a lot of credit hours, it was an experience, it was a chance to take something that wasn't related to my major, which is I learned the most in these courses. For example, I took one with Dr. Parker on dinosaurs and disasters. It's not, related to engineering.
There's a wide, especially in the general interest ones, there's a wide variety of things that, like you said, don't necessarily relate to your major. There's
Yes.
a different subject almost every week with a colloquium that you're looking at.
Right.
Did you find that you were learning about things that you would never have taken a class like that? Like, would you have ever taken a class on dinosaurs?
No, probably not. But it opened a lot of opportunities up for me, and it was definitely a great learning experience for, my future.
Now,
So.
can you see that being a part of a living learning community has a positive impact on how happy you feel or what your grade point is? Could I step back and say, oh, those students that have chosen living learning community, they all have better grade points?
Actually, Dr. Parker, you might be able to answer that on how they all compare.
We actually do have some data which indicates that, at least from the beginning of the living learning communities, if you compared the freshman retention rate, the freshman GPA, the overall 4-year GPA, and the rate of 4-year graduation, it was significantly higher in students who belong to a freshman living learning community than in the general population. However, to complement FSU is that after realizing this, FSU has established a number of other living learning communities, as well as freshman interest groups, as well as other academic groups, which have spread some of these benefits throughout the university.
They talked about the structure with the colloquium and the classes. Is it the same for all the different groups?
No, there are some similarities. I think every living learning community has a colloquium, which brings in outside speakers to address members of the community on things that they would find of interest. and almost all of them have some sort of class requirement for a class that is either focused on the theme of the living learning community or at least fulfills part of the requirements. And I'd like to emphasize that these classes, almost all of them, are for general education credit. So we're not asking students to take more credits than an ordinary student would take. On top of that, different living learning communities have different extracurricular or additional perks associated with them, such things as mentorships, such things as research opportunities. If you're a member of Whimsy, you get very special research opportunities with faculty in the sciences.
That's the women in math, engineering, and science.
And I've found out just recently that the pre-health members, the members of the pre-health community, have an opportunity to train as first responders and actually get the opportunity to ride along with FSU EMTs on some emergency calls, something that the average student is simply not going to have access to.
Now, do you look at it as a positive thing that there are a lot of similar interests of the population, and is that ever intimidating that they're all going to be sitting there talking about something in sociology, and as a philosophy major or as an engineer, that isn't my thing?
Right. Well, you know, at first I was a bit worried about that, being a philosophy major, which is not a social science. However, you get into the community and you realize that there's a lot of variety within different people's majors, within, you know, different people's general interests. I know, for example, a good friend of mine who's in the LLC, she was an environmental science major. So it's really interesting to get perspectives on social issues with the environment, political, you know, just a whole range of different perspectives that you know, you can better your understanding.
This is probably a terrible thing to say. Are there males in the women in science and engineering interest group? Just curious, as long as we were looking at
Now, do you find yourself spending all your time with the people in your LLC, or, you know, because, you know, a lot of people think when they go to college is a chance to meet people who are sharing interests outside of your own. So, you know, if you're in something that you're already interested in, do you ever get a chance to really get to explore the rest of campus and find out and meet other people in other areas?
I think you definitely do. We in Bryan Hall, we all had our groups of friends that were outside of Bryan Hall that we'd hang out with and whatnot. But whenever we came home, we always had this group of people to talk to. So if you need help with some chemistry homework, you went down, oh, who's the chem major that I know? And you go downstairs and you talk to the chem major, and it's just like it's like having a family outside of your, when you're back at home in high school, you have your friends at high school, then you have your family to come back and talk to, and that's kind of what it feels like when you're living and learning community.
Yeah, it definitely serves as a support group as opposed to your only group. I'm very good friends with my roommates and my suite mates. However, I have friends outside of the LLC, but it's really nice to be able to come back and talk to my friends who are in the LLC and, discuss our similar interests.
You see so many different positive attributes, and you've been naming them one after another. Are there challenges or negative things about being in an LLC?
For somebody who is a little more introverted, it's definitely a challenge to, get out there and expose yourself to,
You don't have a choice.
People. You don't have a choice.
Yeah.
The Bryan Hall takes over.
Interesting.
So.
Yeah, I would say that I think some of the challenges are forcing yourself to step outside of your comfort zone and speak in front of people, display your opinions, and also have a tolerance for others, which that really teaches you a lot with our colloquium discussions. So I think it is a challenge, but it's a beneficial challenge. So,
when you first started on your first day there, was it what you thought it was going to be, or was it surprising? What surprised you about living learning communities?
I was surprised as to how united we were. Even on the first day, we had a group of 10 people go down to the dining hall and eat together and just get to know each other, as opposed to now, when I've experienced 2 different residence halls. The other residence hall, I barely know anybody on my floor. Everyone's not always outside and talking about things and getting to know each other.
That was one thing I've heard people talk about is you have a tendency to hang out in the hallways of the residence halls.
Definitely.
Is that common to all the LLCs, or is it just seems to be in certain ones?
I can speak from experience with Bryan Hall that yes, we definitely did. I can't
Same
really
in
talk
ours.
about the other ones, but
And that's the kind of student that we're looking for. The strength of the LLCs is in the students, and what we're selecting for when we're selecting students is those who will interact, those who are outgoing and will strike up the conversation.
Well, let's talk about that application process.
Yeah.
How does it work? Is it just you say, hey, I want to live in this hall, sign me up?
Not quite that easily. The first step is, of course, to apply to FSU and be accepted. After that, you apply to FSU housing. Once you've applied to housing, you can then apply to one or more of the living learning communities. Each one has a separate application process, which usually involves a small essay related to the theme of the living learning community. And then those essays are evaluated by a team of people associated with each community to rank the students, and then we make invitations based on the ranks.
Well, you know, if it's anything like my son and my daughter, they got to the point where they said, after applying to a lot of schools, if I write one more essay, I think I'm just going to die. So what did you think when you had to write another one?
Well, honestly, I was kind of excited about it because these topics they allowed me to really express my opinions and you know, just take it from a personal standpoint, you know, to really just put myself out there and show them this is my personality. You know, would I be right for this LLC? And while writing essays can be tedious, it was worth it in the end.
What did you think about it?
yeah, all the essays you write when you're applying to college are very generic for the whole population of people that are applying. And when you find the living and learning community that speaks to you, the essay speaks to you. You know that's asking about something that you have a lot of experience in, and it's not a chore to write that essay. That essay, you know, it's a pleasure to give your opinion and to share your story with somebody who's gonna.
It's also shorter.
They're much shorter.
But do you share it with the other students? Have they seen what you wrote?
No.
Just so curious. No. It's purely as part of the...
Really, it's just like one page and that's it.
300 words for a typical essay. And my advice to most of the students and parents who are applying is write from the heart. Is that what we want to know is what really moves you. And that's how we get to know the people.
And so did you decide, I want to be in a living learning community and I'm going to apply to 5, or did you just say, I really want to be in this one?
I focused on one. I saw Bryan Hall, and I'm a very curious person. You know, I go after everything. So when I saw him, like, this is something for people who like to share their knowledge, and I think I'm going to learn so much from it. I went straight for Bryan Hall, only one I applied to, and I was glad I got in. So.
Well, how competitive is it? Because it sounds like there's be a lot of people interested in this.
I think all of the learning communities get more applications, obviously, than they have positions available. It's difficult to say because in a year in and year out basis, we may get slightly more applications than we have beds, or we may get an enormous number. One thing I can say, though, is that we tend to make more invitations than we actually have positions by the time we add up everything at the end of the year. And that's because a large number of students will apply. Some will decide not to go to FSU. Others will have applied to multiple living learning communities and will choose one over the others. So even though a student may initially be put on a waiting list, there's a very good chance that if they have been listed as an alternate, they will eventually get an invitation to join.
How can people learn more about the programs?
The easiest way is to go to the FSU website, which I think is
So the housing.fsu.edu/live-learn.
And click on that. That will give you access to links to all of the different living learning communities, most of which have their own independent web pages. And it will give you access to the email addresses and phone numbers of all of the directors like myself. And it's a large part of our job to answer questions.
Now, is there anything you guys wanted to, or wish you had known before you applied or before you went to the LLC that people should know about the LLCs?
I would just add that don't be discouraged if you are on the alternate list. I actually applied a bit later, and I was the first alternate. So I did get accepted eventually, and you know, I just don't be discouraged if it turns out that you don't make it the first time, because chances are you will definitely you will make it.
Yeah, I wish I had known about it earlier so I could tell a few more people about it, because it was just such a great experience that I can't imagine my first year without having been in a living learning community.
So you're both of you are completely and totally advocates.
I would say so, yes.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure you are too.
Oh, definitely. One misconception I'd like to address, because I speak to a lot of parents who come during preview, and that they're often surprised that living learning communities are not all major specific. They think that, oh, this is intended for someone who's already chosen a major and is looking for the full immersion. And certainly there are living learning communities that are like that. But as you can see, there's a large number which are not major specific, are actually intended for the student, many of whom may not know what their major is, may be still exploring all that FSU has to offer. And I think the LLCs are a great way to do that.
Thank you all so much for being here today. We've been talking about the living learning communities at FSU. Once again, to learn more about the different LLCs at FSU, go to housing.fsu.edu/livelearn. When we come back, Dr. Barron and I will talk one-on-one about more issues in education.
A spirit roams these parts. A spirit of respect, competition, and academic greatness. Some call our spirit myth. Others call it legend. We call it Florida State University.
Welcome back to Issues in Education. I'm Suzanne Smith, talking with Dr. Eric Barron, president of Florida State University. Dr. Barron, we've been talking about the living learning communities on campus. What benefits do you see students getting out of programs like this?
Well, you know, the data is actually very clear. If you can create a sense of community around what I would call worthwhile experiences and experiences that further your education, we know those students are happier, and they tend to have better grade points, and they're more successful. So my view is, you know, this is a campus that is and should be full of opportunities to build community, doing worthwhile things, and having shared experiences, because it makes our students more successful.
When you first started at FSU, you talked about creating a more student-centered campus. Is this exactly the kind of thing you were talking about?
It is exactly the type of thing that I was talking about. Creating the Honors Fellows and Scholars House, creating the opportunity for veterans to support each other, living learning communities. All of these are examples of building communities that help students become successful. And you know, we're 41,000 students. And, you know, if you're 1,200 students, that might just come naturally to you. 40,000 students, we have to think about it. But the wonderful thing about Florida State is we think about it all the time.
Well, let's think about the research aspect. The several members of the National Science Foundation recently visited FSU in February to officially renew the grant, the $168 million for the National High Magnetic Field Laboratory. What does that mean for the university and for research?
Okay, it means a great deal. First of all, it's the only national lab in the state of Florida. The fact that it was renewed tells you that we're doing a good job, because the National Science Foundation is all about competitive science and engineering, that you go out there and you have to convince your colleagues that you're doing it better than anybody else can do it. And so we know that the science coming out is spectacular, that the applications are strong, and that we have an enormous number of visitors that are drawn to the facility to enable their own research. And the user community uses the Mag Lab as an example of how to do it right. Those are the reasons why that grant was renewed. And so now we have another extended period of time where this very successful laboratory that brings an enormous amount of money into the state of Florida is going to continue to be successful.
Florida's legislative session begins in March. What are your priorities for this session?
Okay, so there are really several. First of all, last year the system lost $300 million one-time money, and Florida State lost the biggest share because we'd been very frugal and we were making sure that this university would be stable despite any budget cuts. So the first priority is to make sure the legislature fulfills their promise last year that the money would come back, and it would come back in the same form that it left. So that's one. The second thing is that we've had this tremendous debate about how important it is that we have more resources. We have had budget cuts 6 years in a row. We also understand that a lot of people don't want it to be tuition. We know we're incredibly cheap compared to the rest of the nation, but if the legislature and the governor say they don't want it to be tuition, then we'd like it to be state appropriation. So the presidents have pledged that none of us will even ask for a tuition increase if additional appropriation can go in. And the third part is, can come in one of two forms, and that is that you have universities in the state that are really the top of the heap in terms of research and are highly competitive with the best universities around the country. We're one of them. And those universities need a little bit more flexibility and need a little bit more resources to make sure that not only do we remain competitive, but that we can climb in the rankings. So there are two proposals out there. To repeat the preeminence bill of last year is one proposal, great idea. Another is what I call Florida State's top 25 proposal. What does it take to get a university ranked number 42 among all publics and get them to the top 25? The citizens of Florida deserve to have universities in the top 25. We're very close to reaching it. We know that students earn more money and are more successful if they're going to nationally recognized universities. So Florida needs to be in that ballgame.
And if people want to follow what's happening with higher education in Florida State in the legislature, how should they do that?
So the best part is that we have a web page, Advocate for Florida State.
FSU.edu.
At FSU.edu. The key there is that as a university, we don't lobby, okay? And I can't go tell everybody, go do this, go do that. But if you sign up for this webpage, then you can get all the information and do it yourself directly, and we make it easy for you to help us do great things.
Thank you very much, Dr. Barron. That's our time for now. Please join us again next month for more Issues in Education. You can watch the premiere episode of Issues in Education the first Friday of every month at 7:30 p.m. That means you can see the next new episode on Friday, April 5th on WFSU-TV. We hope you'll join us as we discuss the latest developments in higher education happening around the state and across the country. If you have questions that you would like us to address on this program, you can email us at issues@wfsu.org. Again, that's issues@wfsu.org. If you would like to see past episodes from Issues in Education, head to the President's website at president.fsu.edu. I'm Suzanne Smith with the Florida State University President, Dr. Eric Barron, for Issues in Education. We'll see you next time.
Financial support for the production of Issues in Education is provided by
The Florida State University License Plate. Your FSU license plate supports scholarships for students who enrich and contribute to our communities. Special programs, gift certificates, and rebates for first-time buyers online at fsu.edu/mytag.